what I do is I went to a D minor, but instead of doing D minor 7, which I could have done, I would have had voicing that went like this. I thought it'd be cooler if the voicing went. So I played the 7th fret of the D string with my index finger. This is kind of a hard shape. I use my middle finger on the 10th fret, and that's the hard part of the shape. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can put my ring and pinky on the 10th fret of the G and B string. And the reason I did this difficult shape is because it made sense with the voice leading. That's how I arrived there. This was something hard to learn. Not like, it's hard to say. Hard to like get it through my thick skull, and I think through everybody's thick skull. Why do you play these hard chord voicings? A lot of people will do it because it looks cool. That's number one. Oh yeah, watch. You know, and it doesn't make any sense. Like why are you using that voicing? They're not adhering to like good voice leading. They're trying to impress an audience basically. Now there's another reason why you might do it. That's still not the best reason, but it's not that, so it's not the worst reason either. It's sort of a middle of the road because some voicings sound interesting on their own. You know, so like for example, if I did like let's say this. Now this sounds pretty. It's an A minor major 7, and the voicing is hard to play. Not as hard as others, but it looks cool, which is not our priority. But sonically on its own, it sounds really good. As opposed to if I did this. It sounds okay, but I like this better. Because there's more tensions. And together, those tensions are kind of what makes it who it is. Anyway, now, so you see, the first reason to do hard voicings is not a reason at all. It's to impress. The second reason to do it is because the chords themselves sound more interesting. So that's an okay reason. But there's an ultimate reason. Like I think a really, really reasonable reason, if that makes sense. A rational reason, maybe you'd say. Anyway, and that's all about voice leading, meaning it's got the shape within context. You had a chord, and then there's a chord that follows, and then a chord that follows that, and keeping it in context with the chords you play before and after it, there'll be a chord that'll be really suiting in the middle. Or more likely, because you're probably not going to think of the beginning and end and then fill in the middle. If you're composing, you might, but if you're just comping, you probably won't. You'll probably play a chord, which will lead you to a cool idea, which naturally leads to another cool idea, and that's not going to be your stock voicings. That'll probably be interesting places you haven't thought of before, unless, of course, you think this way often, and you'll kind of get used to thinking this way. But that's about voice leading. Voice leading is like really exciting, really cool. It is to harmony. I mean, just the sort of grand poobah of harmony is like voice leading sits on the throne. And it's way advanced. It's something to be on the watch for. It's something you can consider. It's not something I would put your body on the rack over when it's not time. But it's something that when you listen to music and go, oh, that was neat. That was cool. I heard the way it went from one chord to the next, and it sounded neat. That probably had something to do with the voice leading. It could also have to do with just the fact those two chords juxtaposed side by side are interesting for some reason. But the way they progress from one to the next, if it progresses in a logical manner, it's good voice leading. If it doesn't, then it's bad voice leading. So first and foremost, you just want to make sure you're playing the right notes that create the chord what it is. Second, after that, you can start to take creative liberties with the extensions. Then you can take the third step and start adding alterations, which might mean substitutions, although substitutions is a larger picture than just alterations. Sometimes they're the same. As we saw, we had an A7, and we did the flat 9 and the low note, and go, oh, whoa, this is the diminished chord. And maybe you wouldn't recognize that that's a diminished chord, and that's what makes it like it's a deeper, broader, bigger picture. Just like when we did this chord, and we go, oh, it's a D minor with a C in the bass, so it's third inversion, but it's also an F second inversion. And you start to see how they're related. I mean, you could have written the song D minor to F, and you would essentially be saying the same thing as what it does say already. Um, uh, Sometimes you can take your extensions and use those as you can really kind of, how do I say this? You know, Wheel of Fortune, when you spin the wheel and the ticker stops on whatever it stops on. Well, all of those other options were a part of that same wheel, and that's the way substitutions and reharmonization and things like that often are. You've got this big wheel. The only difference is we, for the most part, can only see. It's like all dark except for what the thing lands on. And with greater knowledge, you can start to see. Oh, like, isn't there one of the things on the wheel where it's a mystery and they pull it off and it's a trip to someplace? That's exactly what it's like, except for when we don't know it, when we don't know any of them, they're all with a little dark thing over them, and you spin the wheel at random. Hopefully not. This is horrible, worst case scenario. And then you pull it off and see what you got. And if that's your way of living in a world of many more options that are on that wheel, it's going to be disastrous. So at least we know one thing, which is we know where we're at. I mean, we know where the thing is stopped. But when we know all of the options, we know how all those other slots and all those other chords relate to this one, or how closely they relate. Like the difference between a chord that's the parent of another versus a chord that is the second cousin of another, or even an enemy. And then how can we make that enemy chord a friend? Like, what do we need to do in that relationship between those two chords to make it work? This comes into things like modal modulation, or it's fascinating stuff.